Welcome to the third chair. Tonight we are having Erynn Micthell. Erynn is an actress, director, film producer that we met at the Colorado Short Circuit Film Festival. And I can't remember the name of the film she made. What was it again?
It was Death of Socrates.
The Death of Socrates. And I think it won.
It won an award. We'll find out.
We'll find out. That's right. We're really excited to have Erynn Micthell. Please welcome Erynn Micthell. Well, I'm Peter, and that's Doug, and we have special guest coming in from Los Angeles, Erynn Micthell. And as we mentioned in the introduction, Erynn is an actress, a director, a filmmaker, so we are delighted to have you with us tonight, Erynn.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here, and thank you for making the accommodations with Zoom.
Well, you're so welcome. And we met you at the Colorado Short Circuit Film Festival, where we saw a film you made called The Death of Socrates, which was really well done. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's how we came in contact with Erynn, and she graciously agreed to talk with us. So, some questions. I looked up your Instagram, your website, and we'll give you a chance to share that contact information, and we'll put it on the screen later. You had a picture of Marilyn Monroe up with the quote, "It's all make-believe." And it's like, yeah, movies, Hollywood, it is all make-believe, but was there something more special about that quote for you?
You know, it's one of my favorite Marilyn quotes for sure. I consider myself like a very old Hollywood focused person, and so talking Marilyn specifically in that moment, it's really hard to find right information. She's often misquoted, and she's misquoted in favor of this societal image of who she was on film that didn't necessarily reflect who she was as a person. So I just feel very passionately about representing history and representing history in an accurate way, I guess. So that's why I pulled that specific quote. I just love, in Los Angeles, it's really interesting to me because it's like really the film city. There's really nothing like it. There's something very classic Hollywood about it still. But I think at times people are really hard on themselves, whether that's in career or in how they're making their art. And so I really like to remind myself that at the end of the day, all we're doing is playing dress up. Really. So I think it's also offering that perspective that, we're very lucky to be able to play in this realm of make-believe, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to acknowledge that and still have respect for film as an art form.
Do you have like a lot of people coming in from all sides when you're like making a film, or coming in with their own ideas and stuff like that, and putting maybe not pressure, but like, hey, let's do this, and that, this.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I made The Death of Socrates in my Production 2 class at USC School of Cinematic Arts. And the way I approached it was, you have a board of professors that you work with the whole semester, and they're all professors who have worked on, my professors, they worked on anything from, I believe, some Spike Lee films. One of the editors worked on some Spike Lee stuff. Our producing professor produced 13 Going on 30. So, you have these people with these really, really high credits. So how I treated them was, I treated them like a studio. So, USC is the studio that I am a director of, and The Death of Socrates is my project for the studio. And so one of the biggest, I think, learning hurdles as a filmmaker, especially one who's like a director or somebody in a position of power or somebody with the vision, is that you have to distinguish between knowing what to fight for and knowing what decisions are yours and this is going to be my way, versus that collaborative aspect. So I really, really love collaboration. I try to structure how I make films so that all of those extra ideas or that collaboration, that there's strong boundaries around it, if that makes sense. So you don't want somebody stepping in to give an actor a note, for example, but I would love if a cinematographer, while we're checking in with each other, says, oh, what if we tried this shot that we weren't thinking of before, but now that we're here, let's play around and experiment with that. So I guess it's just finding the right avenues for it.
It seems to
I
me
like certain communities.
it seems to me like that would be a real challenge because, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a director you have some idea of the creative direction you want to go, but an actor may surprise you and do an interpretation that, oh my goodness, it's actually better than anything I could have thought of. And so, on the one hand, sometimes for legal reasons, you want them to stay exactly on the script and done a serious way. But on the other hand, they might deliver something more mind-blowing than you saw, and trying to balance that. Is that a challenge?
Yeah, so I am very thankful because a lot of my directing training started in theater. And one of the biggest things I take from theater as a director is the rehearsal and the leading up to the filmmaking. So there's kind of 2 points. The first is that it's interesting how with larger scale projects, one thing that was difficult for me was how much more people are involved. When you're working in independent film, when I was working in independent film in Colorado, I was really the one kind of doing everything, or like with the vision for everything. You know, I came up with all the shots and then my camera person did the shots that I had come up with. Or, you know, I decided all of the stuff that was going to go in the production design. But here, it's really nice because it's really important to vet your collaborators, because you want people to be collaborating with you who are able to really elevate your initial vision in their own areas. You almost want you almost want to not be the expert at everything. You want to have a bunch of experts around you who understand your vision and can support it, because it's so interesting how, Socrates, for example, I had so many ideas in my head about how it was going to get there, but it took a lot of other people helping me to get that extra step towards my vision, if that makes sense.
Sure.
In the rehearsal aspect of it, to go back to that second point, I like rehearsal a lot because by the time you get to set, if you do rehearse a lot, all filmmakers have a different process, so some don't like it at all, but I personally love it. When you rehearse and when you constantly work on things and when you have a really, really strong development phase of your project, then you're able to set this really nice set of boundaries or a structure in place so that when you do get to set itself, everybody understands who they are and what they're doing so that it can go that next step. So you want an actor to know their motivations so that when it gets to set, they can take it that extra mile like you described.
You know, I laughed. I watched an interview of Matthew Modine talking about how he was directed by Stanley Kubrick for Full Metal Jacket. And he said the cast directions from the director was, do the cut again, but this time make it more interesting. And that was it. That was the only instruction they got. Make it more interesting.
Honestly, that makes sense. Sometimes actors get really, and I say this as an actor, but actors, you know, they want to do so good. They want to do so well. They just want to be good. And sometimes they get in their way or they're overthinking it. And saying it like that or giving like a little, I had this one, he used to run the Fine Arts Center. His name is Scott R.C. Levy. He used to do this really funny thing in rehearsals where an actor would do something and then it would cut. He would go, "What are you doing that? What are you doing that for?" And it would just get the actor out of their head and into like reality in a way.
Yeah, that's great. We have a minute left in this segment. Something from your the best of Sade or Sachet. I don't know how you say that. It is a crime.
Yes.
Is that an inspirational music for you that you use for either creating or dealing with emotions, or what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I'm a huge music person. I need a lot of music to visualize films, especially. So I would say, on the whole, music is super, super important to me, especially atmospherically. I tend to pick music that feels atmospheric. Um, but I think it's Sade, but I think the 80s. She's a musician from the 80s, and she's just one of those musicians for me that the atmosphere she creates, I think, is so perfect and fits so much in my cinematic eye, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So it's almost like when I listen to certain music, it helps me understand my own cinematic vision more, or theatric vision, my vision as a director for my art. It helps me understand it more.
Well, I'm more of a Led Zeppelin guy, and we will continue
Love
this.
Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I love Led Zeppelin. We will take a break, and when we come back, we will continue with Erynn Micthell.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the third chair. We have Erynn here. Erynn, let the audience know how you... Oh yeah, I forgot. Peter's still here.
Yeah, thanks.
He didn't take a long break.
And
Yeah.
Peter's awake.
And I'm awake,
Yeah,
and I
you're
checked my
awake tonight.
ID. I'm still Peter.
Erynn, can you spell
At least till next week.
your name for the audience? Because you spell Erynn a little different.
Oh yeah, I'm Erynn.
Yeah.
And you know,
My
Doug,
dad
at the
is
beginning of the
AA.
episode, it actually shows up with her name.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, but I wanted... Who reads the beginning of the episode?
Yeah, who watches the beginning? Yeah.
Yeah.
I work hard on
They
typing
skip-
those 5 letters.
I think half the audience skips to the point where the guest comes on because they don't really
Yeah,
care.
that's right. Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah, we don't care
us.
about the co-host.
Yeah.
Good.
So we're going to talk about being a director. Can you tell the audience maybe what a director does for a film exactly? Since you're an expert on this, and we all know they have the biggest chair in the in the studio or something like that. But what does a director really do?
So there are two really funny things. So the non-serious answer is they're the one that gets credit for everyone's ideas.
Well, that's a good job.
But
to have.
the not serious answer is, or the serious answer is, one of my professors described it this way. His name is Tim Kirkman, and just to give him credit, and he said that a film crew is everyone's going into a cave to explore the cave and get through the cave, and the director is the one with the flashlight. And so I think you're the leader, you have the creative vision, and you're the one that facilitates the art being created. You're kind of the captain of the ship, so to speak.
You know, sometimes when I looking for a movie to watch, and then it's like I'm gonna look for this director. I don't really look for actors or actresses anymore. I'm more like who directed the movie. So they are very important. I mean, you can tell the styles are different. So that leads me to my next question. What is your style as a director?
Yes, so I really feel like biggest reference, my biggest love in this whole world for my whole life, since my grandma watched Gentlemen for Blondes with me as a child. I love old Hollywood so much. Anything that's pre the studio collapse, that is really my wheelhouse in my area. But I feel like it's kind of sad. I mean, I'm a woman of color. I'm a Latina, and looking at that era, it's a stunning era of film. But when it comes to more modern ways of living, modern social conventions, I just feel so passionate about reclaiming some of the artistic expression of that era, and just recontextualizing it through my own lens, through a modern lens. So I want to bring classic Hollywood back. That's my style, personally.
You know, and I think that time they concentrated more on the actors to move the plot along.
Yes. I do say that I am an actor's director for sure. My main focus is director, and I think that comes from, and my love for classic Hollywood, I think, is a reflection of how much theater is also a reference for me. So I think classic Hollywood is the perfect blend of something that's almost like you're watching a stage play, but it's a film instead. It's super interesting in that way, and that hyper theatrical. It's something that directors now like Kenneth Branagh kind of capture. I love that kind of style. Or something like I even think of Babylon was a very, very recent film that paid homage to the era this past award season, this past year. I think it's interesting to pay homage to and go back to the roots of film.
Yeah, but one movie you talked about stage thing. Alfred Hitchcock, he was going to film Rope all at once, but he did have one. It was like 17 to 30 minutes or something in there with Jimmy Stewart. And it's kind of interesting. Like, I wonder where...
I love Rope. It's one of my favorite films of all time. He only had 8 minutes at a time, I think. So he would hide the camera, and then he would switch the reel and bring it back so that it looked like one shot. I would love to do Rope on stage. I love Rope.
Wow.
It's an interesting movie.
My favorite's The Birds. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Oh, that was good too. Tippy Hedge was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I read a quote by Alfred Hitchcock where he said something like he wanted to leave the audience terrified as like one of his main goals from making a movie. So,
I think he'd like to make his actresses
so
terrified too.
So sorry, it's so funny you guys bring up Hitchcock because holding up my laptop here, it's this little Alfred Hitchcock
Oh, wow.
box set.
nice.
You know, when I was in England, they pointed out where he lived. They said Alfred Hitchcock lived in that that building, and it's the door with the yellow or something like that. They told us. I can't remember the exact details. I'm like, oh, wow.
I think the era you enjoy for your training on films is they told stories. They don't rely on special effects or any of the other stuff now. They kept a good story going, and that's what engaged people.
Yeah, I really do agree. And I like that old Hollywood is almost this hyper reality where it's meant to be the real world, but it almost feels enclosed. So you almost feel like you're entering like this multiverse where it's almost saying more about the world we live in because it's taking the world we live in and elevating it, or really, really, I guess,
almost like a side view or something.
Right now, but.
Side view or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like slightly different, but it's representing the real world, but not quite the real world, but different enough that it makes you think of the real world or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying.
I'm curious, you guys, whereabouts would you say old Hollywood ends and new Hollywood, if we can use that term, begins? Was it really when the special effects and computer graphics got better, or was it before then?
I think there's so I split up old Hollywood into a couple different eras itself, but I consider the hard end old Hollywood. I think it's 1969, the Oscars with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner versus Dr. Dolittle, The Graduate, and oh my gosh, In the Heat of the Night. Dr. Dolittle for Best Picture that year was the one film that the studios had to really push to see if they still had studio control over Hollywood. And was not given it to it. It was given to, I think, In the Heat of the Night, or Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, one of the two. And it just cemented Hollywood and studios' lack of control. I think, ironically, we're headed back there a little bit. I think part of that was the Paramount decree that was put in place back in the day, which limited So the Paramount decree was studios couldn't have theaters that were for the studio. So it opened up independent film especially, and so it brought on the collapse of the studio system. So I think anything pre that for me is classic Hollywood. And it's kind of ironic because last year the Paramount decree was actually reversed quietly. So studios are allowed to own their own theaters now, the last I checked. And that's very interesting how, and when you think of Amazon, like Amazon Studios and Apple Studios and all of these studios right now that are operating, it's fascinating how we're almost moving back to this former era of film.
I think people have found out that they enjoyed the independent films, which had to do that because they didn't have budgets to like do $1 million special effects and stuff like that. And I think there was some pushbacks of some of the movies that are like, well, the special effects seem too much. And
Well, you've also-
I've been thinking. Oh, so sorry. Did you have a?
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about Easy Rider when it comes to this conversation. Because when you look at how different Easy Rider was compared to all the films that were coming out around it, it's interesting how Easy Rider, it's not necessarily that. One of my professors, Daniel Noah, was talking about this the other day, and he said it's interesting that it's not necessarily that it was this great film that is stunning and looks perfect and has all these effects or has all these tricks and unique things. It's that it was showing people what they were going through, or giving people this perspective on what they're going through. And I think the problem is that action and a lot of visual effects stuff right now is the easiest greenlit because it is often the cheapest that is able to be made because it's the easiest to make your profit back on as a filmmaker. But in the same breath, it's a little difficult because it's not necessarily the same as an independent film that's really capturing how we're feeling or what we're going through. Everything Everywhere All at Once swept the Oscars last night, and I think that's a perfect example. It's different, but it's what everyone's feeling and going through. Visual effects, I think, a difficult conversation for me.
We'll talk about that when we get back.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break.
And visual effects is a big old conversation.
Real people, real stories, real life. We're looking for guests. We're looking for you here on the third chair. I'm Peter, that's Doug, and how many different ways can we have guests?
Oh, at least 3. We could have them here in the studio in Colorado Springs. We've had guests all the way from LA on Zoom, and we have gone on location, and we got our 3rd one already in the planning phase.
Awesome. Send us an email and we'll get you on the show.
Welcome back, Peter, and with our guest Erynn, and we're going to talk about visual effects, or Erynn's going to talk about it.
It's kind of funny because it's not my area at all. I have a lot of friends who do VFX because it's a really great way to. I think there are good uses for VFX. I mean, sometimes VFX really does enhance the story, like Forrest Gump, for example, and the ping pong balls. Those were all VFX, So something like that is going to elevate the story. Sometimes it's very, very necessary. But I think, I really like Marvel films. I'm not like I tend to, when it comes to films, I tend to usually like everything. I don't love a lot, but I don't hate a lot. I usually I'm very even. But I do think that box office and criticals and reviews and things with Ant-Man and the Wasp recently is showing I think everybody is really, really tired of these extravagant, overwhelming visual effects pieces. However, in the same breath, it's hard because when you have something like an Avatar with the water, for example, it's almost like you have to have something that's that visual effect heavy to get people into the theater. So I think there's this difficult place that film is in right now where They want people to go to the theater, but these smaller stories that can be accessed super easily on streaming, et cetera, it makes it a little difficult, I think, for people to want to go to the theater, especially with how expensive it is now and how difficult it is to access now. So it's almost like VFX is helping bring people to the theater and keep the theater active, but in the same breath, it's not necessarily telling the most hard-hitting stories that are connecting with everybody.
One example I've thought, Transformers 3. It seemed like 3/4 of it was loud and just nonstop high-tech special effects, and I left thinking, like, where's the acting? Where's the story? Where's the hero with the internal and the external struggles? Yeah, you saw it a little bit, but it was almost like we're going to try and make the movie successful based on the special effects rather than the storytelling and the acting.
Whereas Transformers 1 was actually quite good.
Oh, sorry.
Doug was just saying, whereas Transformers 1, he thought they pulled off that objective with good acting and writing and not too crazy on the special effects.
Yeah, I think it's that Y2K era, where it's like that end of the 90s into the 2000s. There's this really interesting editing shift that happened in film. I'm classic Hollywood. I love slow and long. I love slow, long film.
You must have loved Aquaman.
But the 90s, it marked this. It's like some of the Bond, that was the 2000s. You see it in some of the Fast and Furious. There's this really quick style of editing that has suddenly started, and I think it reflects how our current cultural need to have everything immediately. So it's almost like films picked up speed to almost get through it, so people will stay engaged. And so it's like quicker cuts, more special effects. And so it's this experience that I think is trying to itch that scratch we have with our, think of social media. You can access anything 100% of the time, or streaming. You can turn on streaming and have access to every single movie ever made, ever. And so it's like, how do you get through it? How do you this? How do you that? How do you stay interested in something? And I think it's like the human, if we speed up the films and put in a bunch of effects, everyone will be like dogs almost. Like, whoa, interesting. Whoa.
Just like a rapid series of TikToks or something.
Yeah, exactly like that.
But it wasn't always like that. There are people that enjoy the old classic Hollywood style film.
But that modern is what you were calling wasn't that called the MTV cuts? The MTV cuts, MTV quick cuts is how they started editing?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's around that era, too, in general. That kind of MTV, era as well.
People liked MTV, but they were only 3 minute, usually 3 minutes except for Thriller.
Until their real TV, their reality TV. That's where the quick cut idea came.
I just remember Madonna rolling around in her wedding dress on MTV singing like a virgin. That was new at the time. I don't know how long exactly that song went. Yeah. Although I prefer Weird Al's version, Like a Surgeon.
This is sad, but we were talking at dinner. You missed it, but we were talking about the Weird Al movie. So
Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes.
Or is it out yet? Or did it come out this year?
It's on Pluto's streaming.
Oh.
Or Amazon. One of those. It's on one of the streaming services.
Yeah.
Got it.
Roku.
Yeah, Roku. Yeah.
Roku.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look it up because I was interested. I saw the picture of him and he looks interesting. I was like, wow.
It is kind of fun, but it's a good spoof on movies. So it's very well done.
He does say some of it's true, and that's probably correct. Some of it is true. Most of it,
maybe 5%. He did write some of those parody songs, but that's about what's true in the movie.
Good.
Do you like horror films? When you're talking about films that horror films, because I'm not a big horror film fan.
You know, I really do love horror films.
Excuse me.
I'm actually working on a couple of horror films right now. So it's kind of just been, there's this secret with directors, right? There's this secret, this little secret. And you see it as a trend the last few years for sure. I mean, I'm making horror film obviously first because they were just the stories that appealed to me. But as a up and coming director, a horror feature as your first feature often helps you get more eyes on your work in general. So you see a lot of directors now having started with a first horror feature. And so I also think that the horror community in film, it's so tight-knit and close and supportive. And honestly, it's kind of funny, but I think horror film is one of the healthier places to work in film. The horror stories are the place where everyone's a big happy family.
Now,
Is that the happy? I always thought the more sadder the movie, I guess maybe the horrifying, because they said comedies are like the least happy place to.
Yeah, you always hear comedians are really mean.
yeah, and depressed. Yeah. Now, when you say horror, Erynn, are you talking sort of traditional horror that's like a little more gore, or more of a mix of like a psychological thriller? Yeah, there's killing and stuff, but there's also the element of what's going to happen next, not so much straight up gore in your face.
Yeah, so I love all areas, but the horror references I'm working with right now are traditional slashers in the United States. Love those. And then the giallo films from Italy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there's horror from Italy. You know, my two favorite horrors are Alien,
Alien?
the first Alien movie,
Yeah.
and Doctor Who. It's not a horror show, but if you saw the Weeping Angels episode,
They were so scary.
That-
When you close your eyes and they get closer.
yeah, that was super. And you know, they don't have. They're going to Disney now, but they don't have a. They used to, you know, not have a big budget, but the way they did that, you know, it kind of reminded me of old Hollywood, because the premise was you close your eyes and those statues moved.
Uh-huh.
If you kept your eyes open, they didn't move. But you would see
It's
that
funny how that
closed.
plays off of this, like, they don't need to use a visual effect to show the scary angel. It's almost like what you don't see is more scary, which
Yeah.
is something that's a very Hitchcock thing.
Yeah, because because the screen would go blank because the character closed her eyes, and then they open it, and then angel's like twice as close, and then you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, but you're right. It's like a Hitchcock effect.
Yeah, well, we're going to go to a break, Erynn, and when we come back, we'll have you answer the question, at what movie in a movie theater have you ever screamed out loud? When we come right
Okay,
back.
I have my answer. I'm ready.
All right. Mine was Jaws. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm Peter. This is Doug. Doug is going to keep asking questions after I ask my one question, and that is, what
We've been talking
movie?
about a lot of great movies.
Yeah, my question for Erynn is, what movie that you saw in a movie theater did you actually scream out loud?
Yes, so it's funny because it's not a horror film, but I will never forget. It was my little sister and I was out for Christmas break, and we went to the Alamo Draft House to see Uncut Gems. Have you guys seen Uncut Gems?
I don't remember.
Adam Sandler.
Oh wow!
Do you guys have any?
Maybe you cut out for a second. Can you ask that question again?
Oh yes. Can I spoil the moment? Because it's the final moment. It's like one of the final moments of the film,
Oh, yeah.
but it's the one I gasped at.
Okay.
But I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, just hold on. The opinions of the guest are not those of the third chair and its management. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so spoiler alert. If anybody wants to click off, haven't seen Uncut Gems, 2 seconds. So, in the Uncut Gems, it's a Safdie Brothers film, very high energy. The entire film, the most stressful experience alive. It's this man who sells a bunch of jewelry, and he's pretty much conning everyone, and it's about how he's going to essentially fix all of these problems. So very stressful experience, and he fixes all the problems in the last moment of the film. He puts all this money down on this basketball game. He wins all of this money. And he's like, yes, I fixed everything. He gives the money to his girlfriend. He turns around and he gets shot in the face and dies.
Ooh.
And in the theater, I just wasn't expecting it. It was like, and I think like that was so interesting to me because a lot of films or a lot of studio back films can't take risks like that. So to really, it's almost an antithesis to film. You watch a film so somebody overcomes something and, it's the searchers, they walk off into the sunset at the end to their new life. But to know that this guy was done. I thought it was so interesting, and it was more, like I said, more real than reality.
Wow.
It's stranger than fiction, and I love films that can capture that because it's kind of hard to capture that in film.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Now I almost want to watch that.
Yeah, well, the other one I screamed at.
It is a wild experience.
Yeah. Well, the other movie I screamed at, not quite as much as Jaws, was the first version of The Exorcist. That was pretty intense.
I have a little story about that. I watched it at a cousin's house when I was a kid, and it freaked me out so bad. I still to this day can't watch The Exorcist. It's terrifying to me. But he gave me a samurai sword to sleep with. He was like, "Oh, just sleep with a samurai sword. You'll be fine." And I was like, "What am I going to do? This demon comes to get me with a samurai sword. What am I?"
Swing wildly.
Finally, you might get lucky.
You might get lucky.
Of course, then they had Repossessed in the 80s. That was the comical farce on it, but it had the girl who was possessed. She was the mother this time only. It was a kind of like a Saturday Night Live version of it that was just completely silly.
Horror film, I actually just remembered, it recently came out on Shudder, but before that it was impossible to get. And they had done a screening in Los Angeles of it. And that film is Possession. And there is this scene in the middle of Possession. It's about a possession. And there's a scene in the middle where this woman is just like a long shot. And I want to say it's like over 10 minutes, or at least it feels like it. And it's just her going through these physical, like bodily, like movements and all these movements while she's possessed. And that, I watched that in like a big group, essentially a theater with a bunch of people. And that was a very visceral experience as well. And third, Texas Chainsaw. Texas Chainsaw is another one that is wild.
So the original one, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or the redo?
Yes, and the original one. I don't like the redo. It's a little too. It's kind of ironic. I think it feels like a Friday the 13th film, and ironically, the people who remade Friday the 13th, I think, were involved in it. So it doesn't feel like a Texas Chainsaw film.
Okay. Now, you've read quite a bit. Is there a book that you one day would make your dream movie? You would like to be producer, the director, maybe even the actress in the movie. One book you can think of?
Such a good question. Shoot. My extended answer is because it's a musical, but it's a musical from a book. I would love to do a cabaret movie. Sally
Okay.
Bowles. That is my biggest dream ever. I love that. But I actually have a video game franchise that I'd be a little bit more interested in IP wise versus a book, and that's the Resident Evil video games. They're like zombie video games, and I love them, and I would love to give them the art house treatment of horror.
Wow. I'm just trying to picture you in doing a Liza Minnelli role. Do you have the dance moves?
You know, they're dance teachers.
She probably had dance teachers. Could Liza Minnelli dance? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Well, I'm
never
assuming-
seen her. I didn't see Cabaret, but I never seen her.
Well,
dance.
there's some cabaret line dancing.
Well, that's
Bossy, so he's got those weird moves.
yeah. So you got.
Oh, yeah. So, a couple other questions. So, inquiring minds want to know, what are some things that people would be really surprised to know about the entertainment industry?
Yes. I talk about this all the time with my friends in Los Angeles. So I come from the world of film studies. And film studies, it's very cinema is God. I think it's fun. I think it's a fun exercise to overanalyze a film, analyze a film. I think there's something so interesting about that. But I think a lot of people would be really surprised to find that a lot of things in film are because it looks cool and happy accidents. I do think the best directors come up with a lot of very interesting things and put in a lot of interesting things. And that's not to say every film is that, but there's a lot of people who just treat film as it's my 9 to 5. I show up, I do it, and I leave, and I don't think about it that deeply. And that was very wild. For me, film is life. Always thinking about the cinema. But sometimes it's just casual.
Wow.
So the people who think about it 9 to 5, are they in the creative part, or are they maybe the filming or something like that?
It's like a mixed bag. There are some that are directors. There's also a lot of directors here that don't like actors. That was also super interesting. Or they're scared of actors because they don't understand the actor's process. And I was surprised because I think the one thing a director has that nobody else has is that they work with the actors. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's really an interesting.
I read that though. Even some of the old Hollywood ones, they weren't.
Well,
They didn't. They weren't. They said, "Oh, I love directing movies, but the actors weren't there."
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. Also, there are several well-known directors that actually don't even say a whole lot to the actors at all. Clint Eastwood is known for being on set and just saying, "Okay, go ahead," and that's the instruction. Yeah. And they didn't do the whole lights, action, camera, sound, roll, any of that because it kept scaring the horses in the westerns, and so they learned just to start quietly without the big pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, and from a director's perspective, I think some people who aren't necessarily, or who are studying film or who are doing independent film on a smaller scale, I think they feel like they need to be in control of everything. And something that's really surprising when you're out in Los Angeles, and not even just Los Angeles, whenever you're working on larger independent film, not just everybody's around and we're all here friends with the camera, which totally respect. And I think that sometimes those films have more to say than a studio film, But when it comes to working film professionally, it goes back to the collaboration thing. Directors work with people who understand their vision so well that they just don't get in anybody's way. I think particularly there's Goodfellas, that really long tracking shot through the kitchen and around to the table, and everybody's, oh, Martin Scorsese is a genius for that tracking shot. That tracking shot is crazy and the best thing in cinema. Martin Scorsese was so frustrated that day, he said, get me this tracking shot, and he left set. So it was the cameraman who came up with all of that.
That's great. So we're going to go to a break, and when you come back, I'm going to ask you the question about a quote from Seneca. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And we'll have you talk about that when we come right back. Hi, I'm Peter from Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching, and as you know, I do help people with drug and alcohol recovery issues. I love to help people get better, but I also offer a variety of other services, including regular life coaching services. I've helped several people write and finish a book. I've helped a doctor that was in medical school graduate and then get into a residency. And I also actually have quite a background in mathematics, and I do some math tutoring for the GED as well as the ASVAB for those that are thinking about a career in the military. So my contact information is on the screen. Please send me an email or a text, and we can talk about some of these services and how I can help. That's Peter Grigg at Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm Peter, that's Doug, and we are here with our special guest, Erynn Micthell from Colorado, now in LA, actress, filmmaker, director, all-around great person. And when I left off, I asked the question about a quote by Seneca that basically says, luck is when hard work means preparation. I think there might be a sense that, if you're in the acting business, like, how much work is there really to that? And, like, I know from my limited experience, it's a lot of work to really learn the craft.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, is a lot, this kind of, like, step toward the dreams. It's something that a lot of people think about and a lot of people want to do, but they are so focused on what's outside of their control. And I think there's some times where that's like, something that's, like, for me, for instance, I'm a Latina, and I could focus on how much harder it is, for me to do something, or how many more hurdles I have. And it's not that those don't exist, it's that if I focus on what's out of my control, I'm just going to think it's impossible. So that quote, the hard luck meeting preparation, I think that is the number one thing in life, in everything. If you put work towards it, there will be a chance it'll come to you. It's just a matter of continuing to get up and do it, continuing despite any type of failure. And I think the work, it's like, the work is your whole life, I think. We're all artists, and the thing about artists is our job is to be really raw and honest about our lives and what we're experiencing and what we're feeling, so that other people can feel seen, or because that's why we're doing it. We're doing it to connect with people. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's about being raw and honest.
Yeah, I mean, I always laugh and cheer, actually. I see these YouTube videos of either kids or young adults, and their favorite band will invite them up to play. And these kids or adults, they're fabulous musicians and put on an amazing performance, but had they not prepared for that moment, they wouldn't have been able to pull it off. And it did propel them to at least becoming more famous.
Yeah, I had so many ideas about how I was going to do this. I wasn't going to go to graduate school. I was just going to come out to Los Angeles. And even stuff that's happened to me in Los Angeles career-wise that I can't really talk in depth about. I couldn't have orchestrated that. I couldn't have put that together. I couldn't have said, I'm going to wake up and do this, and then this is going to happen. You almost have to just and let it take you where it's going to take you.
I have a funny story very briefly. I was bored one weekend and I responded to a Craigslist ad to be in a horror movie here in town by a Hollywood team. And because they couldn't get any union people, I got 2 parts, and I actually became SAG eligible because I decided to do a couple of parts in a horror movie because I was bored on a weekend. But it's funny how those things work out. So
Exactly.
I've seen from your social media, you're all over the place in social media. What's the best place or way to follow you or contact you? And do you like people contacting you with questions or things like that?
Yes, so I am most active. I share a lot of clips around my just daily life on both TikTok and Instagram. So those are at Erynn, just my name, 3 times, ERYNN, super easy. My website you can access, it's ErynnMicthell.com.
I see a pattern.
And so any of those are going to have updates on what I'm doing and all of that. And I am that art is about community, and you can't do this business without relationships and without knowing people and without not just I know famous people, not even just that, without just knowing and having a community. It's really difficult to be an artist. And so I'm super happy with anybody reaching out to me for questions, for advice, for anything like that, filmmaking, anything. Please reach out to me. I'm super happy to help. And I just wanted to plug a Colorado, the Millville Art Theater is looking for some people to apply for some theatrical things, and they were very low on numbers. So if anybody is looking to do theater in the Springs, the Millville Art Theater is looking for more people.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for being here. And you've agreed to come back next week for another episode. So in the meantime, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell icon so you know when we've uploaded an episode. Good night from all of us here at the Third Chair.